we're representing the autonomous Sinixt, and we operate our decisions and what we're involved in based upon the two Sinixt laws. The whuplak'n, which is the big law, that's the law of the land. That means whatever's here on this land, whatever grows here, whatever walks here, everything of the land. What's the water is the water, in the water is part of the water. That's all our responsibility. So the big law is the whuplak'n. Everything in this land defines our responsibility, how we take care of it, what we're responsible for. The second Sinixt law is smum'im. Literally translated, smum'im means belongs to the women. So the matriarchy is the women who represent this tumulao. Doesn't mean the queen. It doesn't mean the princess. It means the women who represent the care, protection, and responsibility of this land. And by upholding those laws, we're upholding the future generations to this landscape, no matter what identity they hold, whether it's settler, Sinixt, anybody. So under those laws, we follow a tribal governance model. The tribal governance model is where every person is responsible for having an opinion and making a decision. It doesn't mean that you have to speak. If my daughter says, "Mom, I agree with your opinion," it doesn't mean she has to speak. It means she's made up her mind, and that's what she'll support. If she wanted to have a different decision, she could then say, "I agree with everything, but this is what else I'd like to see. I don't agree with any of it, and this is my opinion." So every member has a right to speak. Every member has an opinion and a right to speak that opinion about any given decision. If it's about water, if it's about a resource, if it's about that tree right there. That's how no one gets to cop out and say, "Oh, I don't have an opinion. Oh, I don't need to make a decision." Every single person is responsible for the tumulao. Every single person is responsible to have a decision. So those are the laws. Those are the governance models that we follow as Sinixt traditional autonomous people. Part of witnessing and creating testimony are all of the pieces that lay outside of just what we've talked about. Our community, our service providers, our environmental workers, all the people who are trying to decolonize and work for decolonization, all of the people who want to share in different governance models, then all they have to do is look to the Sinixt and begin the process of creating those models within the context of their work. If it's writing a book, if it is protecting water or the land, like Perry Ridge Water Users Association, those are the things and the people who will begin engaging.
Yeah, I do live down on the other side of the Canadian-Washington border, about 50 miles in the Washington state, on tribal property, and it's my grandparents' allotted land in Sinixt territory. And I was also a former member of the governing body of the Caldwell Confederated Tribes, which is a confederation that was established, by the United States government of various tribes, 11 tribes actually, and they somehow figured out a 12th one mysteriously. But anyway, the Sinixt people, the Lakes people, also known as the Lakes, are one of the tribes. And so, but a lot of Sinixt people, because of settler colonizing and genocidal assaults and other ethnic cleansing activities, many moved out of Sinixt territory for survival purposes. Some went to other nations, went into Okanagan country. Some of them went north. Some of them went east toward Tanaha, but they're still Sinixt peoples. But many and most of a core group moved on to the Caldwell Indian Reservation, and this is where it's very interesting from my standpoint, from a political science point of view, because the Sinixt members there are in an occupation of that reservation that has been deeply politically divided in many ways. I had mentioned today to some people about the tribal termination days of the 1950s and 1960s on the Caldwell Reservation, where a lot of Caldwell tribal members basically sold out and wanted to become, white people basically, and live like everyone else and give up their tribal identity and move off the tribal lands and basically terminate the reservation from its existence. In other words, giving up the land. That's basically it. And so it was very divisive, and it's still divided today, although the termination issue was resolved in 1972, it's still in play. The reason why I mention this is background, because that division and cultural destruction as a result of colonization and so on and so forth is in play here with regard to the Caldwell Confederated Tribes dividing Sinixt people. The Sinixt people on the Caldwell Reservation are a divided people as well. And it's really sad and pathetic. We've got to figure out some way to unify ourselves in a better way, so that we find more cooperation for the common good of Sinixt territory. And the other things, of course, are obvious, I presume, to most of you, of the other work that I'm involved in, for instance, that you may not know about, but I wanted to mention, is a matter of dealing with generally the racism and so on and so forth by settler colonizers and whatnot, and it aggravates the divisions of the Caldwell reservation of where the Sinixt people are and so on and so forth. So with that background, I wanted to provide some knowledge about the basis of why there is factionalism among Sinixt peoples to this day, and it comes from that legacy, from that history. And while I'm disappointed in all that, it came by us honestly, because we've been divided again by colonization, and that's why we have to work so hard for decolonization. And decolonization isn't just important for indigenous peoples, but it's also important for settler colonizers to help them resolve the feelings in their heart that make them find hatred and disturbance about themselves, and perhaps, the legacy of the damage they've done to indigenous peoples throughout the world. As today, I think most people need to agree that the United States is the worst state terrorist in the world. And so these divisions of colonizers and the colonized are kind of natural processes. And so I'll stop there. And so thank you, Marilyn, for the chance to mention those things. Lim.
And the reiteration is basically that we are autonomous and that Colville Confederated Tribes does not represent Sinixt interests in Sinixt to Blewett in Canada. And the divisiveness that is widespread on the Colville Reservation and here in this community is clearly apparent and insidious and a pinnacle point of why we're creating this testimonial and witnessing video.
Correct, and just as a friendly rebuttal is that we should not leave here without understanding that this divisiveness and fractionation of the Sinixt peoples is not accidental. The Colville tribes are central players in that, and it comes out of those termination days, as I mentioned. If I'm repeating it, I apologize, but it's got to be made clear that this stuff comes historically, and so again, I'll stop there, Limnan.
Yes, we're happy that Maryland has shared with us the laws that need to be respected for this land, and it isn't difficult for our association to follow those laws. In fact, they fit in perfectly with the environmental movement, with the matriarchal, the Mother Earth, all of the things that we hold dear. And as a grandmother and a mother, these laws help me to look for a future for the children, as well as knowing where water is worldwide. Maryland's position on protecting the water within her territory fits right in with a petition we have launched to protect the water on Perry Ridge, which has many streams that provide domestic and agricultural water. And many of the creeks along Perry Ridge, some have had burials unearthed. So we know it was an important cultural area as well as important for the future. Further to that, we are now looking, Marilyn and I and members that are here today, we're going to put together a map of the Sinixt territory, and within that map we're going to expand core protected areas for climate change. That's been a recommendation it's the one thing we can do to help with slowing down climate change. Forests are very important. A lot of people look at how we drive our vehicles, but just like the Sinixt laws, you look to the land and to the water, and those are our teachers. So happy to work with Marilyn, happy that the Sinixt share their knowledge and their ancestry, and their elders have also helped us through the years. And Eva Orr, the elder that you may all recall 25 years ago, she said, and I listen to her words every day, never give up.
I've been very lucky to learn some of protocol on how to collect berries in this Tumulao for Marilyn James and her family. But last year we discovered cut berry bushes by the big house, done, we're assuming, by one of the white women who now caretakes the big house where Bob Campbell and Ava lived at some point, and Lola Campbell. And then we learned this year that the Colville tribe is planning to do a berry protocol picking workshop here in the Tumulao, bringing up people from the Colville tribe to pick berries here. And having witnessed how the bushes are just cut, and there's probably no Sinixt protocol being done if someone can go and kill 5 years worth of growth in order to fill a couple buckets. And this is just some of the colonized Colville's way of trying to access their land, and knowing that Marilyn's done such amazing work where she's touching out to people of the community to teach them how to gather in a way that respects the whuplak'n under SMMIAM, the rules that are dictated as such. And just knowing that the Colville Confederated is bringing up a busloads of people to learn how to pick from this white squatter is just, it just sort of sums up how this whole situation is unfolding. These fraudulent ways of pretending to be cultural ways when it's being taught by someone that's actually committing genocide against the Sinixt that live here by keeping them from being able to access their traditional territories. So just some of the many things that I've witnessed over the 10 years living here in Sinixt Tumulao.
So what we're really asking for, a lot of our environmental work, is for a covenant to be placed over the land until the question of Sinixt extinction is resolved. For the government to stop allocating resources to development or other tribal groups, to stop giving land to other tribal groups, to create avenues for Sinixt, autonomous Sinixt, to have a say in the decisions on Sinixt's landscape. And that's through a petition to Richard Canning's office. And Richard Canning's has agreed that he will take, every time we deliver a bundle of signed petitions, that he will take those petitions to the legislative floor. So we have attempted on many different fronts, whether it's sitting on a roadblock on Perry's Ridge or Mount Sentinel, whether it's petitioning the government representatives, whether it's witnessing the bad behavior of people who are teaching culture, and by doing that they've gone out and clipped the berry bushes, which is, if my mom or Eva were alive, they would have been spanked for doing that. But these are the things that we need to witness and be aware of and to document as what is going on.
I'm very fortunate and to have started a consultation with Marilyn and with my advisors during my education, and Marilyn and her mom and Eva 2 decades ago, starting with work at the ancient village site north of Lemon Creek. My research partner, Alyssa Nauman, and I have been co-directing excavations there since 2009, bringing university students there to train in archaeological methods, but also learn about this traditional territory and the Sinixt homeland. We're working on this ancient village, which has a really important occupational history that covers over 3,100 years, which was almost continuously occupied for that amount of time, making it a very unique village context to understand how people utilize this landscape over a really, really long period of time. We're really fortunate that that we're able to continue this work on a persistent basis. We have brought, this is now our 6th field school, and I think overall 12th research trip here to the Slocan Valley, where we're amassing a large amount of data to talk about the prehistory of this valley, but also the Upper Columbia River areas in general. Some of the artifacts and things that we have found at Slocan Narrows site come from hundreds of kilometers away. Some raw materials from as far south as Kettle Falls in northeastern Washington, which was a really important fishing ground for Sinixt, and to other locally available raw materials that are found here in the Kootenays. So this is giving us a really good indication of the seasonal movements of people over that vast amount of time that this site was occupied. I think it's really important to note that our project and the research, we have to submit our permit applications to the BC Archaeology Branch. Those permit applications then go out to 14 First Nations groups, none of which are the Sinixt, nor do they go to the Colville either. This consultation that we do is always before we actually go to the consultation we do with Marilyn and folks like Lou. It preempts anything that we actually submit formally through the government to receive our permits. And that's a long-standing relationship, and our research questions are guided by those that Marilyn and Lou are interested in learning about, and having the science-based evidence to help them discuss with the knowledge that they know, and that they can take it from the archaeological record and use it as supporting evidence.
So I've been interacting with the autonomous Sinixt for over 20 years, since I first came here in 1999. So that was Marilyn, and so I've had a relationship with her ever since. And the last 10 years, I've been trying to answer the question of how and why the Sinixt are extinct. And looking at contemporary issues, political issues. I'm a political anthropologist, so I look at things like policy, I look at court cases, I also look at popular opinions, and then intersect that with narrative and people's understanding. So what I've come to find in that decade long of doing research is everything leads me to this is Sinixt territory. And there's a very big distinction, particularly in British Columbia, with the land claims process and the lack of treaties here, that who are the owners of the land. And so that question has become particularly muddled when you have people who are susceptible to a bureaucratic extinction, which is really an extinction of hindrance. So when you declare somebody extinct, then you no longer have to deal with them. And then you end up with these splits between band councils, which have authority over the reserves, which are part of the Indian Act and that whole colonial system. And then outside of that, across British Columbia, you have autonomous people who sometimes are in conflict with their very band councils, because I think the name of the Colville Business Council says it's, their job is business. Whereas for the autonomous people, it's the generations of people on the land and what that looks like forward. On a personal level, in working closely with Marilyn, and she's the best person I've found to decolonize with, because when you say something stupid, she'll tell you it's stupid and explain to you in detail how come it's stupid. And so that's the important work that as settlers we need to do, because we're part of the problem, and we're also very much a part of the solution. So when you go back to the laws of whuplak'n and smamim, I try to live my life according to the laws of whuplak'n and smamim. And that makes me an ally with Sinixt, but that also just makes me a better person in the world out there. So when you have a set of laws that are about respect for the land, about respect for the people, about respect for the elders, and that you don't wait for someone else to take responsibility for something, you step up. And so that's the true gift that I have found in my 20 years of working with Marilyn James. And she's been the constant in this territory. She was doing the work long before I came. She's going to be doing the work long after I leave. And the space in which other tribes have stepped in, including the Colville tribes or the Silt or Okanagan, is the space that Marilyn James has created here. When I came here in 1999, I was told there were no Indigenous people here. And all you have to do is look at the environment, especially in Castlegar, where the college I work at is located. You have the confluence of two major rivers and a floodplain, and you also have a lush interior rainforest. There's no way that Indigenous people didn't live here. So in 20 years, we've gone from there were no indigenous people to there was Sinixt and Marilyn James to now people are really confused. Is it Sylph territory? Is it Sinixt territory? Is it Ktunaxa territory? Which is really a symptom of colonialism and neocolonialism, because what's happened is you pit indigenous peoples against each other, fighting over nothing or not enough. And in the case of what's happening in this territory, you have other bands and nations who are claiming that territory. And there was just an article in the local Nelson newspaper with the school district, and my son is in this school district. And, you know, I see what happens at the school. The school sees me coming because there's something to do with Sinixt issues. And they're not even allowed to name the names. They're not even allowed to say the word Sinixt in the education system here in School District 8 because the Ktunaxa have said they can't say anybody's name because it will affect their land claim. So that's the environment in which we exist here. And it's our job as settlers, and this is the work that I do, educate settlers, because we have a very poor education and understanding of our role in this. We think that it's indigenous peoples fighting against the government, but what we forget is the government represents us. So when Sinixt go to court, they represent themselves against the government. That's us. If we're not doing the work and calling on our government and saying we have to stand up for the Sinixt, then nobody is.
I have lived in the Sinixt Tumhulau for 30 years now, which is over half my life, and worked with the autonomous Sinixt, including Marilyn, for a good part of this time. The laws of Smamim and whuplak'n deeply inform my relationship to this land and also to myself and my relationship to this place. As a woman, I have a responsibility to step up and as a settler in the situation and do something. So as a writer and an activist, I stepped up and started this project called the Blood of Life Project with Marilyn and Therese and other settlers, where we documented some of the oral tradition of the Sinixt people. Marilyn and Therese told traditional and contemporary Sinixt stories, which we recorded, followed by discussion amongst us about what the deeper layers of meaning were of these stories. These recordings we then turned into a book and an audio series for broadcast podcast. There's also an art installation opening. We're working on a school curriculum to go with the book for educators as a way of bringing to life the values that are deep in this land and that need to be honored, because these aren't just values about the Sinixt. This is knowledge about this place where we as settlers have made our homes, and it's our responsibility to show up. It's also been a great pleasure to work with Marilyn and Lou and Therese. And to get to know my home place as a refugee from a refugee family. Home is very important to me. I understand what the loss of home means and the situation in which basically the Sinixt have been turned into refugees in their own homeland. It touches me very deeply, and I often say to people that I have my own bone to pick with colonialism, and that's important to me to show up. The government, as it currently stands, does not speak for me, so I have to speak for myself. The policymakers do not speak for me, so I have to speak for myself. And it's easy to stand with the Sinixt because their values are my values, and their connection to this land is something that I honor really deeply. And so to be able to be part of a solution instead of a problem is actually a very uplifting process. And I encourage other settlers to really step up and see what empowerment there is in standing for the right things and making our government accountable for the neglect, genocide, an erasure of not just the Sinixt, but all Indigenous people in this country and across this planet.
My name is Bonnie Vickers, and Hadi Bonnie Ada. That's my native language, native tongue. And I'd like to offer this to my sister, Roxanne Mukui, who has worked with me. And I'd also like to honor Marilyn James, that I'm going to offer her tobacco and honor the Sinixt territory that we're on, and that I've worked with Marilyn James for a number of years. I've been very honored. My grandmother was with Whitson. My auntie has provided our laws that we're going to be doing this model up on, that have been for thousands of years. And it's an honor to be able to do this and share. And it's an honor to be able to work with my sister here also too. So I'm gonna let my sister speak a little here, and we're gonna go from there.
whuplak'n. My name is Swambly Chantabian. My English name is Catherine McCooey. In this territory I'm known as Nispa'a. This is my Witwit'en sister, and she's the one who's asked me with tobacco to offer teachings on our traditional ancient laws that work very well for tens of thousands of years. It's through her cultural authority that I stand before you. I'm honored to do so, and I hope I don't shame anyone in the process. So, our indigenous nations are governed by three primary laws that, to my knowledge, through my training with elders, medicine people, different countries, they're all the same laws. And even ancient culture settlers have the same laws. And it's tricky to speak to these laws in English because the contemporary settler worldview and language don't encapsulate any of the concepts by which we live and see the world. The first law in Sinixt, as we've discussed, is whuplak'n. So that's an example of the first law, which is the law of we in English. Everything's related, everything's interrelated. Nothing is separate and compartmentalized. Anything we feel, do, think, or say impacts all creation. So it's incumbent on us human beings to make really wise decisions, and in everything we do. In our cultures, there's no such word as autonomy or independence. No one gets to make unilateral decisions. No one. Not hereditary chiefs, not clan mothers, not elders. No one. So we both come from Coast Salish nations, and I'm going to share with you the Coast Salish governance structure, including the first law and most important law, which is the law of interconnection. Settler scientists are really starting to catch on to some of these concepts of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum communication. Hopefully in the next few years, they're going to discover things that we've known for tens of thousands of years. So the governance structure in which we're implementing in the Nelson and District Women's Center is based on our Coast Salish indigenous model, which is almost identical to Sinixt as I know it, through Kukumok's, through AKA Marilyn James. So the governance model in our traditions is there's a council of matriarchs and elders and clan mothers. A council. The hereditary chiefs, their job is to enforce and adhere to our traditional laws. The council of elders and matriarchs hold them to that task. If for any reason a hereditary chief over a long period of time decides that they're going to make irresponsible or selfish decisions, breaking our laws, the council of elders and matriarchs can strip them down of their button blankets. They lose all rank, role, privilege. And in this way, our social structures are very sophisticated. In that system has a bunch of safeguards protecting us all from tyranny, because nobody gets to break those laws, make selfish, irresponsible decisions for very long, or they'll be uprooted. And then if a hereditary chief is stripped of their blankets, whether it's male or female or other, then the council will also choose someone from that same hereditary family that's been demonstrating responsible decisions to the nation, and then they will be given those chief names and responsibilities. Hereditary chiefs have wing chiefs or chiefs in waiting, where they start training from a very young age, from the time they can sit up around our laws. They go to council meetings, not Indian Act council meetings, but our council meetings, our traditional structural councils. They learn from a very young age how to make decisions that are best for all life, not just the tribe, but all life, and also all four colors of humanity. So the wing chiefs then they're responsible for listening to the instructions of the hereditary chiefs, and they tell the other elders and village members what needs to be done. So, no one has centralized power. There is no such thing as a marginalized person. Everyone is taken care of. The measure of a chief is how well their house, clan, and village is doing. That's the measure. If their people are not doing well, everybody knows that chief sucks and they got to go, right? When people make mistakes or break the laws, they go through a process of accountability in our feast halls where they're educated, they're supported, they're held accountable. When they correct their course, they're also given accolades publicly, congratulated, and gifted. So again, nobody gets to steer or live outside of our laws. Same as I can't stand here by myself and talk this way. I have to have the cultural authority, be given that and asked to do that. And Bonnie here, she has to ask me in accordance with written laws because she carries that authority in her lineage. Otherwise, none of this would happen. And then, of course, we're all here on this beautiful unceded Sinixt territory, this this sacred territory. And we're here because Kukumoks asked us and honored us to share a little bit what we learned. So with the Women's Center, it's a non-profit society. It has the usual board of directors, staff, and members. The overlay, our traditional governance system works like this. There's a council of matriarchs behind the board of directors. They're the ones making sure that we adhere to the laws of this territory, but our governing laws. So that's who the board of directors consult with. So the board of directors are the hereditary chiefs. They receive instruction from the matriarchs and the clan mothers. And then the hereditary chiefs let their wing chiefs know, which are the co-executors, what decisions are being made, what needs to be executed. And then it trickles down. I say down in that it's a hierarchy, but it's not hierarchy. There's no English word that I know to describe it. Hierarchy in English or settler culture is generally synonymous with tyranny. We have these safeguards in place where no one gets to be a tyrant for very long if they take a notion to it. See, no one's more important than another. Everyone gets a say. So in the Women's Center, the co-executors, executive directors, they're responsible for identifying the needs of all the members and the community members, marginalized populations in the Kootenay region, to make sure everyone has a voice. And then they bring it back to the hereditary chiefs, who are the board of directors. The board of directors, i.e. the hereditary chiefs, meet with the council of matriarchs to make sure that all the decisions are made in adherence to our traditional laws. So that's it in a nutshell. We hope to be getting funding through the Vancouver Foundation to implement this, but we'll implement it anyways. They give us money or not, because it's our way, and it's a good way. And I guess my message to settlers is our ways are beautiful. Learning about Indigenous cultures is not learning the history of residential school. That's a history. That's a recent history. Our cultures are beautiful. Our social governance systems, they work. They're just. No one is left out. And so I really encourage settlers of all colors and Indigenous people who have not grown up with your cultures, please learn it. I think the survival of humanity depends on it. We didn't have water shortages or lack of game under our laws. So if we return to our laws, this is the way to our survival. That's what our old people say and our prophets have said. And Kukumok's here is really spearheading a difficult path. And so we honor her and try our best to support her in that. It takes enormous courage because it's not a very popular position to take. How do we know she's adhering to our laws? Because she's here protecting the land and the water. That's how we know, and that's why we back her. Yeah. So, do you want to say anything?
I think she said it all. And it's an honor. It's an honor to be able to work with Marilyn James and the struggles that she has gone through for all of us, and for the land and the water. And our prayers are continually with Marilyn, continually.
And to the crew, thank you for coming
Yes, thank you, Limplin. Thank you.
back. And
So I would just like to take a moment to thank everybody who came to give testimony and to witness this event that came about through an old connection 24 years ago, that we can follow this story over a long period of time and see a body of work that encompasses all different walks, whether it's service, environment, whether it's writing or academia. There are ways to approach and be a part of what we are trying to accomplish here, which is to bring back an awareness of the laws of this land. It is so critical and important for people who live here in Sinixt Tumhulau to understand just a little bit about the laws and the culture and cultural practices, and how to bring those back to their very own lives and activities and incorporate them into the work that they're doing. I guess my final words are, I don't need friends. I need people to work with me, and that's how friendships evolve. When you do the work and you stand for the truth, and the people who are doing that and wish for relationships and wish for all of those things, all of that comes out of the heart and the spirit and the soul of the work. And this represents that in a big way. And lim limp, lim limp, lim limp, lim limp to this day.
keep rolling. We stand behind her. It's in our way. That means that we support what she's saying. Yeah. It's a visible public presentation that we support what this woman says. We stand behind her. Yeah.
And as you see, lots of people have disappeared. It's been rainy here, and so people have gone off. But also that fire right there is one of the biggest witnesses to what was said here today and what was done here today.
Mm-hmm.
And that fire stands as the most important witness. And whenever we have ceremonies and whenever we have anything like this, we light a fire, and that fire is our main witness to what's going on here as an elemental being. Lim.
Mm-hmm.